Hi everyone, I'm Ava and I'm an American living in the Netherlands. I've actually lived here for a little over a year and a half now, and I've been making videos for about a year about my life here in the Netherlands, and what I don't know is why I haven't made a video yet about grocery shopping. I feel like I've alluded to it a lot in my videos where I'm kind of going grocery shopping to pick something, but I've never really talked about what it's like when you do that in another country, because if you've moved abroad, or even if you've traveled somewhere to a different country where they speak a different language, you might have noticed that grocery shopping is a fun experience. It can be intriguing, insightful into a different culture, and it can also be downright frustrating. So today I wanted to share some of my grocery shopping experiences with you in the Netherlands. Like, what were some of the challenges, some of the obstacles I overcame? Wow, this is sounding more and more dramatic as I go. What were the little hiccups that I had when I first started grocery shopping here in this lovely foreign country? What were the things that stood out to me and still stand out to me? And then what are some of the differences I've noticed when I compare the grocery shopping culture, but also just supermarkets in the Netherlands and the US? Anyway, you know what? That was enough of an introduction. Let's get into the actual video. So I actually wanted to start with what it was like for me when I first moved to the Netherlands and when I initially started grocery shopping abroad. And I know it sounds a bit dramatized to say, oh my God, there were hiccups, it was challenging. But honestly, because grocery shopping is such a regular part of life, it can be extremely frustrating when you move abroad as a 26-year-old adult and realize that you can't do something that you should have learned when you were 10 or younger. So bear with me here when I talk about these little hiccups. So starting with hiccup number one is, turns out you can't just guess what the food product is by looking at it if you don't speak the language fluently, or at least at an advanced level. I must have bought like the wrong type of cream 3 times. It's not an exaggeration. That's when I learned the difference between opgeklopt and opklopbaar in the Netherlands, which means whipped cream or whippable cream. I also wonder if this is something that happens in other countries, because, as a side note, I actually think this is pretty funny. So my girlfriend, who is Dutch, when she moved to the US, which is where we met, and we've been together over 5 years now. It's actually quite some time. Anyway, that's not what the video is about. But when she moved to the US as a new bright-eyed Dutchie and she went to the grocery store, she bought half and half for milk. So that's what she would use. The first few months in the US, she used half and half in her coffee and so on. And I understand where she was coming from, because in the Netherlands, you can buy halfvolle melk, which is milk with half the fat in it. Half and half is not halfvolle milk. Half and half is half whole milk and half light cream. So when she was going, milk in America is so delicious, it was because she was literally putting cream in everything, which is fine, but I think she was a bit horrified to discover like that's how she had cereal and so on. I can see that that's a bit much. The other thing that's of course tricky is, where do you find the food items in the supermarket? Now, if you've just lived in the Netherlands your whole life, you just know where to find things, like what goes with what. But when I moved here, I was like, where are the tortillas? That was a random example, but honestly, I, for instance, did not know where to find eggs, because in the US, the eggs are always in the dairy section. I don't know why the eggs are in the dairy section, but the point is that they are in the US. So I went in to the supermarkets here fully expecting to find my eggs in the dairy section. I just couldn't find them. And then I kind of like went around circles in the supermarket. And you know what? If you've been wandering around the supermarket in circles for like an hour, even someone as serene and relaxed as I am will get flustered. I am not serene and relaxed half the time, but you get flustered and then you just think, you know what? I could do without the eggs. Something embarrassing that I'm going to admit to you all is that for a long time, until pretty recently, until last week, I used to think, wouldn't it be really convenient if the aisles in the Netherlands like actually had like labels on top about what was in the aisle? And then it turns out they did.
Have these just been here the whole time? Oh my God, seriously?
They had these labels there all along. They just aren't as big and like in your face as they are in the US. So I discovered that last week. It would have been really, really convenient to have known that those labels were there back, a year and a half ago when I was confused wandering around the store. Anyway, enough about that. Oh, the final thing I wanted to mention actually, and I've said this a few times before, but it is really a problem for people who move to the Netherlands. And that is that we often do not have a Dutch bank card if you have just moved here. It takes a month or two at least before you can get a BSN, before you can get an address, and then you can get your bank card, your pinpas, so that you can use your Dutch pinpas at the supermarket. If you have just lived in the Netherlands, you have probably never encountered this problem, but then you have to pay in cash. And that is really difficult because you kind of hold up the line, no one pays cash anymore, and honestly, you may not even know that your cards from back home don't work, and so you're trying to use those cards and everything's going wrong, and then, you're an adult who thinks, why isn't this working out the way it should? Recently, I've actually heard many expats who have just moved here a couple of months ago complain to me about this, and they're like, you won't believe what happened to me. I feel so embarrassed. I'm the only one who's ever done this, and I have to reassure them, oh no, this is a thing, that when you move here, you cannot use your card at the Albert Heijn or like the Ethos, but it's less of a problem at the Ethos because, well, you don't have a line of angry shoppers waiting to just, go through, and then there's you like, why doesn't my card work? Well, anyway, talked about this before. It's quite annoying. A quick note here, I do talk a lot about the Albert Heijn because that is my primary go-to supermarket, but I have gone to other supermarkets and I go to other supermarkets. Like when I first moved, and this was in Amsterdam, I would also go to Dirk van den Broek, which is also when I thought to myself, why is it that these supermarkets in Netherlands are just named after people? That is the least creative thing you could do. Okay, so not to brag now, but after a year and a half of grocery shopping here, I am a pro. Just kidding. Well, as much of a pro as I ever will be grocery shopping ever as a chore. But speaking of grocery shopping as a chore, I actually don't view grocery shopping to be that arduous here in the Netherlands because it's just a really efficient and honestly pleasant experience. Like, first of all, in the US, you walk into a grocery store and it's always cold. Doesn't matter what time of year, you're always cold or uncomfortable. Maybe when it's really hot outside and you walk in, for those 5 glorious seconds, you're like, oh, relief. And then you proceed to freeze immediately. Whereas here, I've always found the temperature's pretty okay. Maybe it's still not perfect, but relatively better. But the other thing that I really enjoy is that things are organized really clearly and they're labeled really clearly. And there are also not too many choices. Now, at first, the not too many choices may sound like a bad thing. Like, why don't you have more choices to, things to choose from here? But honestly, there's also very much the paradox of choice in the US where you're standing there looking at 6 different types of tuna. I don't buy tuna, so I don't know why I came up with this example. But like pick anything, like 12 different types of tomato sauce, literally anything. And then you have to stand there picking between the best. So here, honestly, the fact that there are just a few pre-selected products makes life pretty easy. I do wish the Albert Heijn I went to carried more than one type of tofu, but hey, I accept it because overall it's fine. In the US, comparing between items that seemingly just have a different cover can be time consuming. Whereas here, that's not the case, except if you're trying to pick between what goes on your bread, oh my God, all of the options. And if you're trying to buy cheese, there are like up to 3 different sections, huge sections for cheese in this small supermarket. It blows my mind. Am I complaining about that? No, because if I had to have the paradox of choice dilemma happen anywhere or for anything, that would be for cheese. So definitely lucked out on that one. And speaking of things being labeled clearly, one example that I really like at the Albert Heijn is they have this price favorite label, which is basically the product that gets you the biggest bang for your buck, or like a big bang for your buck, relatively speaking. Another thing that makes grocery shopping pretty easy here is that you have a lot of self-checkout counters in many of the grocery stores. So not just at the big grocery stores like the Albert Heijn, which is a huge chain, but also at some of the smaller stores, I've seen self-checkout counters that really just go hand in hand with this idea that, okay, if you were gonna go grocery shopping, how can we make this really efficient? How can we make this a less, intensive process for you so that you can just go into the store, swift through the aisles, pick what you need to get, and then just pay and quickly exit. Because of this, I think a lot of the times in the Netherlands, people will go grocery shopping more frequently and pick up lesser items. So I know tons of people who go almost every day or every other day. In the US, what was more normal from my perspective was that you would go once or twice a week. And then you would just load everything up. People with cars would go with their cars so that they could just stuff their cars with food items, and then they wouldn't need to go for a week or two. Here's a fun fact. In the US, I've lived in several cities, and in those several cities, I've gone to several supermarkets, big and small. And my favorite supermarket that I ever went to was Giant Heirloom. And I loved grocery shopping there because it was really organized. There were lots of self-checkout counters and so on. And it was just, everything felt really easy. And the prices were also not too bad. It's like, this is a great experience. And then turns out that it is owned by the same company that owns Albert Heijn, Ahold. What are the odds? So in the Netherlands, grocery shopping is extremely organized and efficient. Except at the Aldi. I don't know what's going on there. But anyway, the Aldi is a perfectly fine place to shop. I go there too sometimes. It just stands out. Another reason why I don't feel like grocery shopping is such a big chore here is because it kind of fills me with warmth and coziness every time I walk into a supermarket. Why is that? It's because there's often this little coffee cart or a little food stall right outside the supermarket or as part of the supermarket where you can just grab a cup of coffee or a little snack. Oftentimes it's free, or at least sometimes I've seen it be free. But many of these times you have these little coffee carts where you can get snacks and it just smells of coffee. So every time I go in, I feel a bit happy because it's warm and it smells nice. And I think of nice things when I think of coffee. And so I walk in a great mood and I'm all ready to shop. So that is a great trick these supermarkets are using. But I love it. It, I also think, speaks a little bit to the Dutch gezelligheid culture where you just want everything to be a nice, pleasant experience. Now when it comes to differences between grocery shopping in the US and the Netherlands, I've already mentioned and intertwined some of the differences as I went through the video. But one of the things I wanted to mention was how expensive it can be to grocery shop in the US. Many of you have commented that you maybe haven't noticed a difference, and while that could be true because you could take some of the more expensive supermarkets in the Netherlands and some of the more cheaper ones in the US, and there you wouldn't see too much of a price difference. But overall, generally speaking, there are just many of these stores that are built around the idea of you can buy fancy, wholesome food products for an extremely high price. And that is fine. It's like the Echo Plaza here in the Netherlands. You can go to Whole Foods in the US or Trader Joe's, and there it's very expensive. Now, the problem is when even the mid-range or cheaper supermarkets have certain products that I would say are not affordable for the average person in the US. So why does bread need to start at $2.50 or $3? For the cheapest bread, maybe you can get something for $2. But here in the Netherlands, if I'm buying $2 bread, I'm buying the nicer bread. $2 bread. €2 bread, I'm buying the nicer bread. It can be quite expensive to the point that I often had friends say things like, well, I'm not gonna go grocery shopping and I'm just gonna get takeout because honestly, the meal I was planning on making would amount to the same as ordering food, so I'm just gonna do that. I can't imagine people saying that here, so that's when I really see the difference. And the note I wanted to end on today was stamps, because I feel like this stamp collection thing that happens in Dutch supermarkets is a very, very Dutch thing. This is what I mean by it's insightful into Dutch culture. Okay, so when you go grocery shopping at a supermarket, the supermarket could be running a deal where if you go there and you shop for X amount, like 10 euros or something, then you can collect a stamp. And you can collect these stamps, and then at the end of a certain period or whenever you have enough stamps, you could buy like wine glasses or a pan or something like that, like a product for a low price or for the equivalent of X many stamps. Isn't that great? But I feel like that's so Dutch, like, ooh, I'm gonna collect these stamps so that I can save them and then buy this thing. I mean, we have coupon clippers in the US, but here, I don't know, something about like the collecting stamps. I've also seen that with the Douwe Egberts coffee, like you collect the points that are on there. So I feel like this collecting thing to buy something is a very Dutch thing. And I really enjoy seeing that at a supermarket. I have not seen that at a US supermarket, but if you have, let me know in the comments down below. That was what I wanted to share with you today about my grocery shopping experience here in the Netherlands as an American. I'm curious to hear your thoughts as always. Feel free to drop a comment down below. I always read them. I look forward to reading them. And until next time.